Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today we're going to be discussing one of the most highly anticipated games of 2020 for many people, and that is, of course, the Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is a game that many people thought would never happen, the way that SquareEnix sometimes dangles Final Fantasy announcements in front of the audience and just takes forever with the development. People never know what to expect from SquareEnix when it comes to this franchise. But the game, apparently, as long as it doesn't suffer through any more delays, is coming out in just over a month's time from now. If you weren't aware, earlier this week, they put out a demo on PlayStation 4 for the game. It's about a little bit less than an hour long, maybe an hour, depending on how slowly you play through it. But it's available now if you would like to go and check it out. But right now, I want to discuss my feelings about the game in general, how they've changed after I played through the demo, and what my perspective is when it comes to this game in general, because I haven't really discussed it at all on the channel. As you guys know, I don't really like to discuss upcoming games all that much unless I see a major red flag on the horizon, such as a Fallout 76 or an Anthem, which I try to warn people about. But in the case of most games, I let them speak for themselves after they actually come out. But in this case, after playing through the demo, I just want to briefly touch on how I feel about the game as we're headed into the launch period. Now, really quickly, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I think it's important to know what perspective this is coming from. I played this game originally back in the 90s when it first came out, when I was still a teenager, and it honestly is one of the first JRPGs that I have ever played and really heavily influenced my gaming habits moving forward. Up to that point in the 80s and 90s, there really wasn't a whole ton to play. Yes, there were RPGs around, but they weren't really widely popular here in the West. You had a lot of sports games, action games, platformers, different stuff like that, a lot of racing games and fighting games, stuff like that. Some more generic stuff that dominated the market. But when Final Fantasy VII came out and came onto the PlayStation in the 90s, it was really a revolutionary game. You can go back and play it now if you've never played it before. You won't really understand what people were really excited about necessarily because it looks so dated now. But if you were playing the game at the time, if you were playing other games throughout the 90s, when Final Fantasy VII came out, it was mind-blowing how ahead of the competition the graphics were, both in the cutscenes and just the regular game. The polygonal shapes that were crudely done throughout the PlayStation 1 era were done so much better through Final Fantasy VII that it really was groundbreaking at the time and really raised the bar for the industry. Believe it or not, I know, like I said, it is tough to look back at the game now and think about that, but in the 90s that was the case. And even aside from the graphics, the different gameplay systems, the materia system, the summon system, so much about this game really clicked for me when I first played it. I really did enjoy it. I played through it all the way several times throughout the 90s. And so this game is really an important game for me throughout my gaming career, if you want to call it that, and the different choices that I made after I played this game. This really was sort of a watershed game for me. So you might be interested to know that when the remake got announced, I really wasn't all that excited about it. The first trailer, of course, I got a little bit excited because it looked really cool, but once more information came out, we started getting information about, oh, it's only going to be the Midgar area of the game, which is the first area that you go through, and in my opinion, is maybe the most boring area of the entire game, and it's an area that I would always try to rush through so I could get out into the open world and experience what I felt was the more interesting stuff that was in Final Fantasy VII. So I wasn't really a fan of that, and then when I saw that the combat, to me, what we saw in some of the previews and some of the announcements that they put out looked very similar to what they did with the combat in Final Fantasy 15, which I was not a fan of. And I will come right out and say, when it comes to party-based games, it's a single player game and I have a party to control and there's a lot of action going along on the screen, I honestly do prefer a turn-based combat system. I know a lot of people don't like that. I'm a little bit more old school when it comes to that. I do like turn-based combat, but I understand it's not as popular as action-based combat. But when I saw what they were doing with it, I wasn't really a huge fan. I also wasn't really a fan when I started seeing the game pop up in the PlayStation Store, and I felt that they were being a little bit misleading. Well, not necessarily misleading, but I felt like they were omitting information from a more casualized audience. Now, people like you and me who consume YouTube videos and maybe go into forums and check out a lot of gaming content on a daily basis, what I call enthusiast gamers, we are really in debt. We're right dug in. We are all tapped into the news. A lot of us would have known for a long time that the game only contains part of the game. It's not really a full remake. It's only kind of like the first chapter. But when I checked out in the store, I noticed it doesn't say anywhere on the title page that it's only the first chapter, and it doesn't say until you get into you have to click on read more, and you have to scroll past the first page, go a couple paragraphs down in here before it even makes any mention that this is only part of the remake. And I think if you have people who maybe they only buy a couple of games a year, but maybe you have some older gamers in their late 30s or 40s who played the game as a kid and they got excited, maybe they're not as tuned in as maybe you or I might be. They might not realize that they're not buying the actual full remake, and that might throw them off. So I'm not really a huge fan of the way that Square is handling this. They chose not to label this in an episodic manner, which makes sense to me because especially what we saw with Telltale shutting down last year, people are kind of soured on the episodic nature of some game releases. I don't really think that experiment worked out because people just want the complete edition of a game. People don't love having to wait for the next part of the game to come out. They want to move on. When a game comes out, they want to play through it and go to the next game. That's how most people play. So I don't think they wanted to lean into the episodic fact of Final Fantasy VII during the marketing, and I think Square Enix kind of dropping the ball here by not being more upfront with people. And they are going to have, undoubtedly, they will have people who buy the game and don't know it. It might not be a huge amount of people, but there will be a percentage of people who buy the game thinking it's a full remake. They remember the game from back in the day, and when they get only Midgar and it's like an expanded version of stuff that wasn't really in the first game, I don't know how well that's going to sit with a more casualized audience, but we'll have to see. But besides that, let's get into the demo itself real quickly. So when I first started playing through the demo, the first thing that I thought was, oh yeah, I'm really enjoying this. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And then it quickly started clicking for me, oh, what I'm feeling here is just pure nostalgia factor. I need to try to push that out of the way because I'm going through these areas that I remember from playing through the game 20 some odd years ago, but now I can rotate the camera around. It's not just a fixed screen, and I can actually see what else is going around, and the characters look so much better, and they're fully voiced, and even the side characters have a lot more personality and depth to them now. They just feel different now that there's a 3D character model that actually looks realistic instead of some polygonal figures with a box of dialogue over their head. It feels a lot better, and I was like, oh yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. But like I said, I had to try to push the nostalgia factor away, and I said, okay, I need to focus on this and judge it like it's a current day game, and a game that people are going to be expected to pay $60 for in a month's time. And so I started looking through it with a more critical eye, and I started thinking, is this a game that they can really stretch out for the 40, 50 hours they're trying to say it is? They're saying it's going to be the same length as a typical full Final Fantasy game, but it's just going to be Midgar. Well, I hope they have some interesting tricks up their sleeve, because while the graphics, of course, look pretty good, they're not the most jaw-dropping of all time, but the city itself, yes, it's got some futuristic industrial stuff to it, but you're mainly in slums in what we've seen of the city. How else does the city expand? Based on what we know from playing through the original game, all the sections are probably very similarly set up, so I don't really know how they're going to differentiate and make the city look interesting. One of the coolest things about Final Fantasy as a series is generally they take you to very fantastical locations. I mean, it's right there in the name. You get to see stuff that you can't really imagine seeing in any other environment. And if we're just going to be stuck in Midgar, where stuff is just kind of like a real-world environment, it's kind of not really the Final Fantasy that I'm thinking of in my mind, even though I know the originals, of course, started in Midgar. I mean, we all know that. But is that going to be enough to protract into a full game? I don't really know. Let's talk about the character movement, some of the gameplay a little bit, because of course, for me that is very important. The characters themselves felt very good as I was controlling them. They didn't feel light or floaty. They actually felt like they had a little bit of weight to them. The command inputs felt pretty good, although they did take a little bit of getting used to because you are using pretty much every button on the controller. So there's a bit of a learning curve, but you do catch on pretty quickly. By the end of my first less than an hour of playing, I felt pretty comfortable with all the controls, although I was occasionally switching back and between characters more than I wanted to. I was hitting that a couple extra times, but other than that, it was pretty intuitive. Like I said, though, it does have a bit of a learning curve, but you'll be playing like you know what you're doing in no time. It's really not all that difficult. As for the combat itself, I'm not totally in love with it yet. It did start to click for me a little bit more as I went through the game, but one of the issues I had is there's a lot of times where the character that you're playing is going to be surrounded by the enemies during combat, or when I was fighting the boss, there were sometimes attack animations that I felt were being done off screen even though I was locked onto the boss. I just couldn't really tell what was going on all the time when it came to attack patterns, and they want you to rely a lot on dodging or blocking attacks, and I felt that sometimes an enemy, when I was playing against smaller mob groups, I felt sometimes an enemy could hit me from behind and I didn't really have much of a way of knowing. And when the boss, sometimes some of the boss attacks were telegraphed and you could totally see them coming, but individual attacks here and there I felt weren't really telegraphed well enough for the player. Now, I might have been missing stuff. I didn't play through it 1,000 times and like master the demo. I only played through it once, but there could be audio cues that I was missing or stuff like that. So I don't want to harp on it too much and say that it was atrocious, stuff like that, but I wasn't really in love with the camera angle and the way that they handled that. I felt like it could have been pulled out a little bit more, and again, I was just I wish this was a turn-based game like the old one, because for me personally, that's what I like. But I was trying to get used to the combat system. I will say it felt a bit, when I was playing as Cloud, the main character, it felt a bit hack and slashy without any sort of the finesse combos. Now, there are moves you can pull off. Once you get a few hits in and you pull off a bit of a combo on the boss with your characters, you can then have the option to go down into the menu and you can cast a magic spell or use an ability that your character has. Each of them has their own special abilities that they can use to their advantage. You can also use an item if you want to maybe heal or refill your magic points, stuff like that. If you need to swap back and forth between your characters, it's just a one-button input. It's very simple. And something that I was getting better at as the game went on, it teaches you this right away. There's plenty of tutorials to start the game with, so it does tell you this. But I got quicker and faster as I went through, is you can swap back and forth between the characters, build up a couple of hits on the enemies, and then you can open up a little mini menu. It will sort of slow down the time, and you can choose to do a special attack, use an ability, maybe some magic. You can use the items like I talked about before. Then that character will start doing that action, and then as they're doing it, you just hit the directional button, switch to the other character, attack really quickly, and then build up the ability to start another magic attack on the boss with that character, or use an item to heal up with that character, and you can sort of swap back and forth, attack really quickly, do whatever you got to do, and then input commands back and forth like that. And I actually got to the point where I was kind of enjoying it, so I was pretty skeptical the most about the battle system going into it, and by the time I was done with it, I was actually kind of enjoying it a lot more than what I thought I was going to, because I never finished Final Fantasy 15, in part because I'll just admit it, I hated Final Fantasy 15 almost from start to finish, but the combat system I had no use for either. But this one, the way this one works, I actually did enjoy it by the time I had finished the demo, and I am interested to play a bit more. The one thing I am concerned with, like I said, is the issue with the camera angle and not really knowing where some of the attacks are coming from sometimes. I can see that leading to problems later on with some of the enemies, but again, this is only Midgar, so I don't know what they have in store for us. I'm thinking more along the lines of some of the hidden secret bosses that were in the original game, but of course those ones probably aren't going to be found in this one unless there's something that I don't know about. Maybe there's some super fans out there that have really been keeping track of this game that would know better than me if there's going to be hidden secret bosses like there were in the original game. I imagine there probably would be, but I don't know that for sure. But anyway, so I said that playing the demo changed my mind about Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, did it change it for the good or for the bad? Well, as I said in the video, I was pretty skeptical about the game and the combat system and some of the typical SquareEnix shenanigans that have been going on before the game came out. I'm skeptical about the game only being Midgar. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that out. But a couple days ago, I would have said the odds of me buying the game were probably about 30%, and even that would have been high, and I really was only going to probably buy it to do content for the channel because I thought that would probably be a game that a lot of people would be interested in. Single player game, big title. I figured that would be kind of in my wheelhouse for the channel. But after playing through the demo, I will say I am now more leaning towards buying the game more confidently. I don't think it's going to be my game of the year or anything like that. I'm not in love with the game. I'm not sitting here I'm not making one of those videos like, my mind was blown while I played this. Oh my goodness. And I'm not going to sit here and play through the demo feverishly until the game comes out, just getting myself all hyped up. I played through it once. I thought it was pretty good. I think that I will probably enjoy the game itself. I don't know. I didn't enjoy the last Final Fantasy game I played at all. I put about 35 hours into it, put it down, never turned it back on again, and I am likely to never touch it again. I did not like the last one. But I grew up playing 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2. I even played, 13, which a lot of people hated. I played through all 13. I kind of enjoyed that. But I'm going to give this one a try. I am leaning more towards now. I am probably going to be buying this game in April. So the demo did change my mind. Once again, if you're really interested but you're on the fence, go ahead and check out the demo for yourself. I'm not sure it's going to answer all of your questions. I know it did not answer mine because, again, the most pressing issue for me right now, I'm still not 100% sold on the combat, but I do feel a lot better about it now than I did going in just watching video of it, because I didn't really like how the video looked, but after feeling it in my hands, I do like it more. But my whole thing is, I'm just not a fan of their decision to only go with, in my opinion, the worst part of Final Fantasy VII as the entire game. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep my interest throughout an entire campaign. We'll have to see what happens. But anyway, how many of you have played through the game? You let me know. That's it from me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.